I'm just starting. Good morning. Today we're going to look at 1 Samuel 19, 20, and 21. And also today I'm on my way to Bismarck to get the follow-up on my shoulders, and then you can tell me if it's okay or not, and if I'm behaving. I don't behave very well. We all know that. And Cheryl will laugh when she realizes I said that too. But anyway, Saul is still king, and David is a servant of the king. And but chapter 19 starts with Saul speaking to Jonathan, his son, and all of his servants, saying they should kill David. But Jonathan and David, as I had commented, had become good friends. And Jonathan spoke to David and told him, my father is seeking to kill you. And they figure out a way that Jonathan can let David know what's on his father's mind and everything about killing David or not. But Jonathan goes and speaks to his father about David, saying, David is a loyal servant. He is a loyal subject, and he's always been very good for you. And look what his playing of his lyre, his music, it brings you comfort. And so why should you be in such a hurry to kill David? What's going on with all this jealousy stuff? And so in verse 6, it says, Saul heeds the voice of Jonathan, and he swears this, as the Lord lives, David shall not be killed. And so then David came back into Saul's presence, and things went on as they had before for a while. And then verse 8, a simple statement. Again, there was war. David went out, fought the Philistines, and struck them a mighty blow. Problem with that is that Saul didn't go to war. He stayed home, and with his mental condition and with everything going on, he was sulking. He was pouting that David was out, battling these Philistines and being successful and bringing more glory to himself, David, than bringing glory to Saul. And so again, this distressing spirit comes upon Saul. And as David was playing music for Saul after the battle, and he's back home again, Saul tried to kill David with a spear. But David slipped away and escaped into the night. And Saul sent messengers. He says messengers. No, they were spies, to watch David's house and to kill him in the morning. But Saul's daughter, Michal, whatever, David's wife, found out about that. So she let him down out of the wall and said, you need to flee tonight. And so then when Saul's men came looking, she said, well, he's sick. And she had put this idol in the bed. And notice there that they had an idol in the house. But she'd put this idol in the bed and put some goat's hair up there to make it look like David was indeed sick in bed. And, Saul, of course, didn't like that, and didn't like the fact that his daughter was helping, protect David from him. And, she said, well, he's my husband, so think of the position she's in, protecting her husband from her father. It just, between a rock and a hard spot for sure. But anyway, David ends up fleeing, and Saul finds out where he is. He's up at this other place, and he sends men again, and these men that he sends begin to prophesy. And so they didn't come back. So he sends more men, and they begin to prophesy. He sends more, and they begin to prophesy. So he goes himself. And this is just crazy. It says, the Spirit of God came upon him, and he went on and prophesied until he came to Naioth in Ramah. And he stripped off all his clothes and he prophesied. And people said, so Saul is among the prophets? And so here the king, just not acting like a king at all, but, God is working in so many different and strange ways that way. But David continued to flee and continued to wonder what have I done? The king is so angry to me. And again he said to Jonathan, he seeks my life. And oh no, Jonathan said, he's not, but let me test and find out. And sure enough, Jonathan finds out that Saul is still plotting against David to take his life. And they come up with this, or Jonathan comes up with this plan. I'm going to shoot some arrows out, and if the boy that I send to get the arrows, if I tell him, go further, that will mean that you need to flee for your life. And of course, that's what happens. And David then, flees again. And this is all spelled out in chapter 20, quite lengthy there. And then in verse 32, starting in verse 30 of chapter 20, Saul's anger was roused against Jonathan. He says, "You son of a perverse, rebellious woman, I know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to be to your shame and your mother's name, but so as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, you shall not be established nor your kingdom." So he's telling Jonathan, his son, that as long as David is alive, you don't have any chance of ascending to the throne of the king because of this perverse woman, son, David. And that's, and Jonathan just says, well, why should he be killed? What has he done? And again, why should he be killed? What has he done? And we hear that same question, asked of Jesus, about Jesus. Why should he be killed? What has he done? Well, he hadn't done anything other than upset the religious leaders, pretty much. But anyway, Jonathan arose from anger from the table, and because of his grief for David and not being able to understand why his father was so upset with David. And so this is when they do that deal with the arrow. Jonathan shoots the arrows, and they complete that plan, and David flees. And in chapter 21, David comes to Nob, this town, and David, when he's fleeing, it sounds like he's by himself. As he gets to this place, and he comes to the prophet, to the priest there, and the priest meets him and says, "Why are you alone? Why is there no one with you?" And David just, tells a little white lie. The king has sent me on some business and said, don't let anyone know anything about the business or what I have commanded you. And so I have directed my young men to hide that way. And so, David's not on a mission, from the king. Well, he is on the mission from the king, fleeing from the king, but not doing king's business for certain. But he asks for 5 loaves of bread for himself and his men. And we've got nothing other than the consecrated bread, for the Passover. And David says, well, that will be, I'll take that. Well, and the priest says, you can't do that unless these men are pure. It's, if the young men have been kept themselves from women, if they, and this was one of the ways of being unclean, to be able to be in the Passover. You couldn't have had a relationship with your wife or, anything that way for a certain time span. But so the priest gave him the holy bread, but within all of this happening, there was another servant of Saul there watching. Verse 11, a certain man of the servants of Saul was there, detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg, an Edomite. And so he, this other guy sees this. And so now then David asks, have you got a sword? Have you got something? I don't have any weapons or anything. The only weapon there was Goliath's sword. And David had wielded that sword once before, as he had, cut Goliath's head off after he had defeated him. But David is on the run and continues to be on the run for quite some time because of the demon, the madness, the jealousies or whatever of King Saul. And, as we read this, it doesn't seem right. We know it's not right that Saul should be so jealous that way and everything, but yet, we see this so often in our daily lives, our jealousies, our impressions, our anger at someone that we just can't seem to get past. And so here, I mean, it's, kings and queens and princes are really no different than anyone else. But the reality is that um, God works in and through all different kinds of people in all different kinds of ways. And even though he has replaced Saul as king with David, in name, but not in actuality yet, God continues to try to work with Saul, to continue to bless Saul and to keep his mind somewhat open, and in his times of clarity of mind, Saul understands that David hasn't done anything, and he welcomes him. But then the evil spirit, the craziness of his mind comes back into play, and it's a reminder for us that we don't know what's going on in everybody's lives all of the time, and maybe we can look at this and we can judge Saul, but we got to be careful in how we judge people, how we look at people in our lives and in our world today.